Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to How Come. Today's episode is Sex Ed. Welcome to How Come's Sex Ed Classroom. I'm sitting here with Andrea Barrica. On the phone from Miami, we have Dr. Andrew Porter. He is co-creator of the Sex Rap and professor of public health at University of Miami. And Andrea is founder of O.School, a shame-free platform for pleasure education.
How come? How come? How come I can't achieve? How come I can't achieve? I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm rolling up my sleeves. Oh baby, I believe these guests can help. 'Cause I can't do it by myself. I wanna jizz.
Hello everyone.
Hey.
It's great to be here. O.School is an amazing platform. It is also free. Andrea, can you tell us how you started? Tell us everything.
Absolutely happy to. So I grew up Filipino Catholic, and when I was growing up, the only thing I was ever taught about sex was not to have it until I was married.
Yeah.
And then in public school, it was all just fear-based, very much just here's a video of someone giving birth, and here are pictures of STIs. And so this led to a lot of sexual shame for me growing up.
Yeah.
I ended up going into technology and built accounting software, went on to do some venture investing, and in all of the companies that I was working with in tech, I really didn't see anyone building anything between Planned Parenthood and Pornhub.
Yeah. There's
I really felt like there was this huge, vast gap.
No, you're either learning from porn or you're going to Planned Parenthood probably for an abortion.
Right, which is super important, right? Which is so important to learn about, birth control and basic anatomy sometimes if you're lucky.
Yeah.
But really in between, there's so much unlearning we have to do. And
100%.
so I built O.School to be a place where people could feel safe enough to work on learning about pleasure and also unlearning a lot, because I think a lot of sex ed that isn't talked about isn't things that people have to learn, but also things that we have to unlearn.
Yeah.
And especially, in the country today where so little sex ed is happening in schools, fewer than 50% of high schools are offering any sex ed.
Is
right
that
now.
true?
Yeah, it's one of the lowest rates. Back in the 1995, 80% of high schools had to offer at least something about birth control or some basic sex ed. But conservative efforts have really succeeded. Right now, of the 50% of programs that are doing sex ed in this country, over 2/3 of them are abstinence only until marriage.
Right.
And so at the same time, you have porn access at an all-time high because of technology. On the other hand, you have an all-time low in the medically accurate information that's being shared. And only very few states, I think, depending on which study you look at, 9 to 13 states right now are offering medically accurate sex ed. So this is really a crisis, and why I started O.School.
Yeah, and O.School, you can literally go on there. It is free, and you can learn how to masturbate, right?
You can learn about the clitoris.
Yeah.
You can learn how to masturbate. We also have educators. We have a really diverse set of pleasure professionals, we call them, from different backgrounds, from medical doctors and pelvic floor experts, all the way, which is so important. I didn't even know what my pelvic floor was until I started
me neither.
O.School.
Until literally 6 months ago. I was like, oh, okay, that's a thing in my body. Great.
I didn't know the true anatomy of the clitoris till I started.
Me neither. Oh my God, we're going to talk about that so much. But we are also talking to our friend in Miami. He is a doctor. And tell us about your podcast, Andrew, because that is educating people as well.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me onto your show today. Excited to talk about it. So my podcast really maps onto what everyone else is doing and talking about. I work with another doctor. We've been teaching sex at the college level for nearly 20 years, and we've spent a ton of time in college classrooms undoing the damage that's done either through ignorance or abstinence-only education, which is really just indoctrinating ignorance into young people. So to kind of address that gap in education, we started a podcast where we have sex-positive responses to questions that young people, our listeners, send in. So every week, we get hundreds of questions, but we choose one of our questions and we answer it, trying to help people get good information, because it's really hard to find good information on the internet as well. The health literacy of trying to find anything reasonable about sex, you're much more likely to find pornography or negative information. So we're trying to address that gap.
100%. Yeah. Okay, so if you guys don't learn everything that you wanted from this episode, basically this is me just sourcing other people that if you're like, Remy, you know nothing, just listen to their podcasts and go on their websites. It'll be great. And you'll learn everything you need to know. But we're going to try and cover, I think, a host of topics. I had somebody write me recently, and she said that she doesn't have painful intercourse, like penis and vagina sex, but she doesn't like a penis in there. And she sent me an article about that being like a thing that a lot of people apparently. Have you guys run into that on O.School?
Totally. I mean, we have so many people with a range of problems, and I think, just as other experts have experienced, it's just a shame of not being able to talk about that part of your life. So we get a lot of people who don't understand their basic anatomy.
Yeah.
Like where is my clitoris? I didn't know. I get people of all ages saying I didn't know what, like, women.
Well, you too.
Yeah.
Like when I saw Andrea speak at a talk the other day, shout out to the V Club. But you were saying that you had never masturbated until really late in life. Like you didn't even look down at your own vagina.
I hadn't seen my own genitals till I started 2 companies. That's how ashamed and repressed I felt about my body.
Yeah.
Kudos to the Catholic Church. It's like pretty powerful what they can make you. They can make you, not touch yourself or look at yourself until you're in your like mid-20s. And I get a lot of that. I get a lot of people who, really don't understand their bodies, don't even feel like they have access to that, all the way to, I would say, the most common thing I get, not just people sharing like the problems they have with sexuality, even if they, are finding pleasure, they just feel like I'm strange, I'm weird, like they want validation for the things they like.
100%.
And so a lot of, creating spaces for people to be educated also means creating spaces for sexuality that goes beyond just what we learn as being the right way to have sex, which is penetrative sex. So one of the things that I really want to get rid of is this term foreplay.
Right.
Because what it really is teaching people is that there's a main event.
There's only one type of sex.
It involves a dick, right? Or a penis. Or
when I was in sex ed, I was like, how do lesbians can't have sex? There's no penises involved. Like, they just can't. But virgins forever. So you can eat 1,000,000 boxes and have your box eaten 1,000,000 times and you're still a virgin. Like, that's just not true. Also, lesbians are statistically having more orgasms than straight couples.
That is correct. Right.
Why?
Now.
Yep.
Because they're not focusing as much as on penetrative sex. Why? Because the clitoris is the most important thing to a female orgasm.
Right. And so all the ways that sex ed has failed, heterosexual people, it's failed even more for people who have different bodies, who have different identities. And like the more that we just unlearn that there is this one type of sex and it's penetrative, the better sex will be for everyone.
Right.
I think that really helps men with sex too, because men are a victim of that same thought process where, there's a main event and I get to an orgasm. And if you can help them unlearn some of that along the way.
Definitely.
They can look at the whole thing as this holistic, fun activity rather than this goal-oriented, must get to this finish line.
Where they're being judged as well. Like, there's so much pressure, I think, for people socialized as women to say no, and be chaste. And there's a lot of pressure on men to be so sexually,
so into
powerful.
And I always say on this podcast, we're very little dick positive because you don't really need a dick to give a woman an orgasm. You need fingers and a mouth.
And a toy, maybe.
And maybe a toy. Maybe a feather duster. But yeah, Andrew, that's a really interesting point because I think it does take the pressure off of men too.
And a lot of the questions that we get on our show are we were kind of surprised. At the beginning, we got the kind of typical question, is my penis big enough? What do I do if I'm pregnant? All of these questions about STIs, basic, like how can I be better at sex? And then as we've started answering those questions, the floodgates have opened. It's kind of great. It's amazing. It sounds like O.School is doing the same kind of thing where you create that space and all of a sudden the questions just come out as soon as someone knows that they can ask it without shame, guilt, and fear. And I think that's the other thing that we're all constantly fighting is there's so much shame, guilt, and fear built into and around the way that we talk about and the way a lot of people learn about sex. And building a space where you get rid of some of that fear, shame, and guilt really helps people ask questions and get to know themselves better.
Yeah, it's crazy how many people have written me like very benign things and being like, am I so strange? And I'm like, no, you're not so strange at all. Like I don't know how anyone survived before the internet and before there was communication like this. I really don't. They had the hardest lives.
Especially if you identify as something not as straight, if you identify as something not as cisgender. Yeah. So many people have had to navigate their sexual lives unequipped and unprepared. And it's a large reason we have the problems that we have today is people not only don't know the basic health, basic anatomy, basic sex education, but a lot of people cannot even say the words around sexuality.
Oh, yeah,
we have
sure.
not. You're right. Consent aside, I have so many people who cannot say the word vagina, the word penis, the word
Yeah.
dick, or these words without it. And so one of the things that we need to do is teach pleasure with everything else that we teach, because again, teaching people about STIs.
There's no pleasure conversation in sex ed. It's literally like, this is how you have a baby, or this is how you don't have a baby. Like, if you actually wanted to teach sex ed properly, I made a joke the other day. Like, if they wanted to teach sex ed for pleasure, they would teach girls to fuck girls and boys to fuck boys, and then the second you want to have a baby, you fuck the other one. Like, I mean, not actually, but buy some fucking sex toys. You can go your entire life without having sexual intercourse, and you can have many, 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 many orgasms. You like, teach masturbation is basically the solution. Like, I don't you feel when you first went to the gynecologist and they asked if you were sexually active, like it was like a test, and like you wanted to like, she would always be like, okay, and are you with a monogamous partner? And I'd be like, no. And then I'd feel so bad. And she's like, well, are you being safe? And I'd be like, well, yeah, but like, I still feel judged about fucking more than one person.
And frankly, we need to have a conversation about how most medical doctors have very limited sex education and pleasure education themselves. I have held my anatomical clitoris model up in spaces with doctors and other medical professionals, and they have not been able to identify the structure of the clitoris.
Yeah.
And so, you know, if there's been polls about where Americans think the best source of information about sex is, and most people still identify their doctors or maybe their therapists, and actually that's not true. There have been sexologists like Carol Queen and others who have been really at the forefront of research and pushing this information to the medical community.
Yeah.
You know, I totally agree with that point that we need to involve the doctors, because they're a huge force of slut shaming for everyone. And also, they need more education themselves. The average medical doctor gets, I think, 10 to 15 hours of sex ed total in medical school.
And then they don't go back and relearn it. And that's the thing, is so like, we didn't know about the internal structure of the clitoris until 1998. Which is insane. And I doubt that like a bunch of, like with a pharmacist, you have to go back and learn new medicine all the time. But I'm sure most doctors are like, no, I know what the anatomy looks like. That can't have changed much. Yes, it has, because we didn't have people looking into female sexual pleasure because it wasn't seen as a necessity.
I think that there are some really serious problems in education across the board, right? So we're talking about sex ed. I think sex ed in high school and abstinence-only education is an easy one for us to point the finger at and say, this is the cause, the root cause of all of these problems that people face over their lifetime. But sex ed is a problem in colleges, in medical schools. It's a problem from beginning to end in the United States. And I think that we're all kind of hitting the same point that we don't have people talking about sex, but yet we know that the vast majority of people are having sex and having potentially risky or dangerous sex or uncomfortable sex or unwanted sex over their lifespans because they've never been trained to talk about it.
Yeah, they're going to do it anyway. Like, people are going to figure out how to make themselves feel good, or they're going to make themselves feel like sex is for other people. And then if they're not talking about it enough, then they're just going to have fucking terrible, painful, bad sex.
Right. I mean, it's one of the reasons why we end up with this situation with dead bedrooms, where people don't even talk to each other about sex. People in long-term committed relationships stop caring about each other's pleasure in bed, etc.
Yeah. Because you're like, oh, well, we made 3 kids. We did it.
20% of marriages are sexless right now.
Really? Mm-hmm. I actually had, I talked about this on episode 30, but a woman wrote me in and she said that her marriage has been sexless for 6 years, and that she doesn't feel that a sexless marriage is a big enough reason to break up. She thinks that there's a reason, but she said it seems like other people don't think there's enough of a reason. And why is it okay if we're not getting along, but it's not okay if we're not having sex?
Right.
Well, and I also think it's part of the double standard too. Like, if there's a man in a heterosexual marriage who's complaining about not getting enough sex, there's all kinds of responses that we get from therapists in medical communities. But if there's a woman who says the same kind of thing, she's told pretty frequently, like, well, you know, your relationship is worth more. Your relationship is your identity. You shouldn't end your relationship because you're not being sexually fulfilled.
He's not beating you. He's not lying. He's not running around. Just be grateful you've got a good man. I've heard this many, many times, and that, you know, it's not really appropriate for women to prioritize pleasure in their lives and relationships.
Yeah.
And that absolutely needs to change.
But it is. And Pamela and I were talking about this the other day because we were leaving a womanizer event and we had just received this wonderful new toy you know about. And I was saying I used to think that female orgasms, we didn't really deserve them because they seemed so unnatural. And the fact that most of us do need like a machine doing it. I think about if I was on a deserted island, I could never have an orgasm, then okay, I must not seek that because it doesn't seem like I deserve it. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that we have, it's 2018. We need to admit to people that a big reason that people have sex is to feel pleasure. And for so long, only one person's pleasure really mattered.
And it seemed like such an important thing. Like, well, guys may come every day. You have to help them get it out.
Well, I mean, I'm a person of queer identity, so
Perfect.
my
Thank
background's
God.
a little bit different
Okay.
because I was with other people and we all wanted each other to get off and have a good time.
Yeah.
So personally, I want everyone to feel good. Right?
Yes.
I think pleasure is one of the basic tenets of having a good life. But no, certainly whenever we talk to people, whenever people submit questions to us, that's the kind of stuff that comes up. Our very first show was How Do Women Orgasm? We have so many questions, like how do women, we sat and talked for 20 or 30 minutes just explaining to people that it's just a normal, natural thing. And if you pay attention to some parts that you probably don't know about and you've never heard, and you click for a picture of, maybe you'll get there. And if you don't, that's okay too. But you can work on being better. So
I heard that upper left on the clitoris is apparently a great spot for all women. Someone told me that the other day. So ladies, try that out. But while we are talking about the clitoris, because you brought this up and we were talking about the structure, Andrea was showing all of us, and I will post it online if I haven't already, the structure of the clitoris. And I think we just need to talk about that more into detail because it's not something we learn. I posted it online and somebody was like, oh, it's fallopian tubes.
I print out, I have access to a 3D printer, and before I teach about human sexuality in the clitoris, I print out a whole bunch of different parts internally, and I pass them around, and the clitoris universally is the one that no one
knows
what
it is.
What it is.
Yeah, Andrew, we have a clit army ourselves.
Yes, she brought so many 3D clits to the V Club the other day.
Yeah, I'm holding one in my hand right now. I mean, are we going to try to describe this to listeners over voice?
I don't think we can, but I think the important thing is that it's not just the button that you see in the vagina, right?
Not at all. It's got 8,000 nerve endings. It's about 10 centimeters in length in the average, human.
Yeah.
We produced a video with animations on O.School, so I
Will
encourage...
you send that to me so I can repost it from How Come? Okay,
absolutely.
perfect.
And I encourage everyone, all teachers, people teaching sex ed, we've created GIFs and we've created all these different resources so that people have access to learning about this amazing organ. It's the most pleasurable organ in the human body. Its only job is to have pleasure. And the amazing thing about the organ as well, like you said, it was really kept out of the medical community. It was written, research about the clitoris was not done, in the 1500s. That's the whole, it's a button, two Italian dudes thought, they were like, of course, right? Two Italian dudes were like, we've discovered the clitoris. And it's just like this little end, only the external.
Bravissima.
Right. Just the glands of the clitoris. The penis has a glands, the clitoris has a glands, right? It's the most sensitive kind of external part that's when you pull back the clitoral hood is right there. And then there's these, this whole other structure that's internal that attaches to the pelvic bone.
It's inside, you guys. Like, you can't see it, so don't try and peek up into you won't see it, but it surrounds your vagina. And this is how I think I can explain it visually for an audio podcast. Imagine a coat hanger, but picture the coat hanger is facing forward instead, and that's the thing that you see. And then the coat hanger goes back into your body, and then there's it looks like balls that are hanging around the coat hanger. And the balls are on the outside of your vagina, so that when the penis or whatever toy is going into the vagina, if you think it's a pulsating vaginal orgasm, Et voila, that is your clitoris surrounding it from the outside.
And the amazing thing too is we have boners of our own.
We have little boners.
Clitoris is erectile tissue, like the nipples, like the penis, and it gorges with blood.
Yep.
At the time of orgasm, it can get 50 to 300% larger. We have clitoral boners.
Yeah.
As well, and so I think when people start to think about it like that, it changes their life. Their life to know the how much potential pleasure there is. It's a denser amount of nerve endings as well. So there's the same amount of nerve endings in a penis and a clitoris, but in the clitoris, it's much more, concentrated and dense.
Yeah.
And that can be really fun for people to explore. And I think that's really what I want people to know. It's not that you have to have an orgasm. It's not that you have to do anything, but for a lot of people, you can. Yeah, you can.
And also, it's meant to be. Like, I used to think it wasn't meant to be because it was so difficult. No, it has that many nerve endings because it's supposed to give you pleasure. And that's the thing that I think was, we have to help the guys jizz because they're so pent up. We're just as pent up, and we get the same exact amount of relief and same exact amount of like, cool, now I can go on with my day.
And there's a whole bunch of health benefits. You can even do things like bring down your blood pressure. So
really?
Orgasm is great. Like, sexual pleasure is if you look at it, it's a whole body release of negative energy. It's a whole body, like, you release all kinds of hormones. You get to relax. There's a whole bunch of health benefits that are related to it for men and for women. So
see, it's meant to be. It's not some like smutty, shameful thing. It's nice.
Unless you want it to be.
Unless you want it to be, and then go be nasty, you bad bitch. Get out there.
A student in Kansas City on my last college tour said that they were taught that the clitoris was the devil's doorbell.
I've
not to touch
that.
it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so absolutely, we need to get people to feel like this is an amazing part that they have an option to explore.
Yeah. So you were later on in life. What was the first time you actually like explored your vagina?
It's really through a lot of different experiences. I was lucky to have a partner who I, had one partner for a long time, and it was a lot of slow exploration. I had to go at my own pace.
Yeah.
And the first time I saw someone else's genitals, it made me cry. It was such a sad experience.
Really?
And so most of my first experiences were mixed, right? There was like, oh my gosh, there's this thing that feels good, but also every time I would experience it, it would fill me with a lot of shame, a lot of guilt, and therapy really helped me.
Yeah.
I walked in, 16 years old into a therapist's office, and I said, I'm not well adjusted around sex.
Yeah.
Help me. And I knew something inside that I was programmed to be a certain way. My earliest experiences and memories about sexuality were all around guilt and shame and don't touch that. And, good girls don't do that. And these types of messages. And so I can't stress enough that it wasn't, I didn't have access. Like, I needed O.School when I was 18.
You were
bad.
in San Fran, right?
Yeah, I grew up in California.
And San Fran is like a pretty like progressive.
I was born in Sacramento, so it was the capital. 2 hours from there. I've been in the Bay Area for over a decade, but
gotcha.
I grew up in Sacramento. But it really, what I think needs to be understood is how potent and how negative for your entire lifetime learning about sex in a shameful way is. It had lifetime effects that I'm still unlearning at 28.
I mean, I grew up in a health class where I don't remember why they said it, but at one point they said there are people who are gay and this is how they have sex, but they have harder lives. And I just remembered being like, oh my God, I can't be gay. I can't have any thoughts about girls, which was tough because I was in a locker room and I'm looking at like I like guys, but I also, and I would pray. I'd be like, please don't make me gay. Please don't make me gay. After that health class, that was in a very liberal school too.
All of my sex ed about gay people was they have AIDS. Like, all of the negative stereotypes about gay people and AIDS, and they have hard lives and they have difficult lives. And then, of course, since it was mostly abstinence-based education, there was a lot of moral judgments that were passed on anybody who was having sex, but especially women. And then anybody who wasn't straight who had sex was going straight to hell, kind of rhetoric inside of a public school classroom. So,
And I think a lot of us who are drawn to sex education do have these backgrounds, right? Like I was 14 when I was told that if I admitted that I was queer or lesbian, that my baby sister couldn't sleep in my bed anymore, my favorite human being in the whole world.
God.
And I remember that was like the day I was like, not gay, not me.
Yeah. Yeah.
It wasn't until, I was in my mid-20s that I came out, and it wasn't until I started doing this work of going through my past and what things really affected me. And it's pervasive, but it's also things that you don't know till you actually sit down and start thinking about your own life, and where were the moments where this guilt and this shame like formed. And it can really get in the way, because I find that so many people that are getting educated around sexuality for the first time can be really defensive at first. And I usually have an open heart to them, because I remember being the same way. Like you form these kind of defense mechanisms, and I think that's one of our biggest barriers as sex educators, is that we are not it's not like teaching someone golf.
Right.
It's not like teaching someone how to put on makeup. It's teaching teaching a subject that for many people, they can't even remember when they form their perspectives about it. And it's like a little bit of a barrier.
Yeah. Do you remember your first orgasm?
It was, I was probably like 16 or 17, and I actually got the chicken pox.
What?
Yeah, that's why that's why.
What?
Because you were home alone
So
all
you
by
were just
yourself?
you were just bored?
No, because you
Oh.
can get chicken pox all over your body. I was 16. I was 16.
So you got chicken pox on your vagina, and you had an orgasm from the fucking chicken pox?
because it's itchy, right? You're not like.
What?
This is the best one I've ever heard. Oh my! So you were forced. You didn't have an option.
know. I didn't know. No, it's not that. I just also didn't know.
You didn't know what you were doing.
Yeah, I didn't know at all.
Holy shit! Okay, so then after the pox went away, were you like,
I didn't have one for a long time after that.
no?
I didn't.
Okay, you didn't try.
No,
yeah. And you probably were like, what the fuck was that?
pretty much.
You were just like, that's a really solid itch. I really want this disease one more time. Andrew, do you remember yours?
I do. So I was probably 11 or 12. I was home alone, sick, and I was snooping around in my parents' closet.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the thing that you do
As you
when you're
do.
11 or 12.
Yeah.
And there was a box, and it said massager. And it was like this little handheld, and it showed a picture of a woman on her side with the massager on her shoulder. And that's where I started. And I ended up on my genitals, and I had no idea what was happening, but it felt really good.
You silly little boy. Oh my God, that's amazing.
I didn't know the name for it. I didn't know what I was doing. I just know that this was really awesome. And I was best friends with that massager for another 2 or 3 years. So
Wait,
until I got caught.
Did
And
she ever notice it was missing before you got caught?
No, because I would only do it when my parents weren't around. So I would like sneak into the room, climb to the top of the closet, pull down the box,
And then replace it.
and then put everything back where it was.
When did you
Yeah.
learn about putting your hand around the penis? When it was it when the massager was taken away?
It was after the massager was taken away.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
I would like lay on the bed on top of it and just rub around, but yeah.
So fun. What a time to be alive.
I remember the color of the box. I remember like the Oster with the little star on it. Like, I mean, crystal clear, vivid memories of my best friend for a couple years.
Do you now think that your mother was maybe using the massager for a similar method?
I am 100% sure, because when I got caught, the shame and the guilt that she, like, you know, it was like a complete, my parents very religious conservative, so like the complete meltdown that they had made it pretty obvious.
God. That's amazing.
I am going to have to hop off in just a second.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, everybody.
That's okay. Andrew, do you have anything that you want to, I don't know, get out there and say to people that you think everyone should know?
So I have two things. Is that okay too?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Touch your balls, touch your boobs, use a condom. That's the first part. And then the second one is, if you have any questions about sex that weren't answered here today, feel free to send one to us at the Sex Wrap. We'd love to have a conversation with you. It's a lot like this. And it was great. Thank you so much for inviting me to be on the show. Thank you for all the work that you're doing.
Thank you so much for being here. I have to ask this at the end of our sexual experience, because I ask everyone. Andrew, did you finish?
Almost every single time.
Okay, amazing. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.
And I would say that my most common advice to women of everything, even sex, work, career, relationships, friendships, is your needs are your needs.
Yeah.
Your desires
are valid.
Your desires.
Yeah.
stop trying to get different needs and different desires. Stop judging your desires and your needs, because they are your needs, they are your desires. Like, welcome to yourself.
Yeah.
I don't know how it's possible that like women always feel not enough and too much.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know what mental gymnastics there are that like too much, not enough, too much, not enough. Like, you're never just
so true.
right. I think also the best sex advice I give people, relationship advice, is talk about these things not when you're at your most vulnerable state, right? Don't get naked, don't be naked, just go out into a restaurant, and you don't, and also I feel like it's okay not to have to bring it up in the very, like, I call it the sex educator way, like, hey Brian, like, you're not going down on me enough, and we need to talk about that. And like, no matter how much we give people the words, some people just, it's too much. And so I like to give people the advice, don't bring it up. Don't admit what you like to your partner right away. Send them an article about it and say, what do you think about this? And then don't expose that it's you until you kind of contest the waters, or get some funny GIFs, or watch a movie that you have selected that talks about it. Do anything to get some confirmation of the other person's reaction. We live in a world where you don't know, no one wants to be shamed for the things that they want. No one wants to shame other people, right? I mean, that's one of the most difficult conversations that you could possibly have with a partner, of like, hey, I'm not having any pleasure.
Right.
Or, hey, I've been faking it for like a year.
I did it 2 years into a relationship because I hadn't even reconciled it with myself that I wasn't having orgasms. I had to be like, hey, we need to work on some stuff. And it wasn't in bed. It was like in a car right before a dinner party. I was like, this is something I think you should know. A lot of guys, actually, I had a guy write me the other day that maybe we can give him some advice. He knows his girlfriend's not having orgasms, and he listens to this podcast, but he doesn't know how to bring it up to her because he thinks she might find it creepy that he's been listening to this in the first place. What do we say to that?
Again, it's about the bravery to broach subjects. I think there are just ways, and again, we can't control other people's exposure to these topics, right? Like, as much as we all want everyone to be like not slut shamey, I have experienced people saying, no, like, I cannot have this conversation. My marriage will be at risk, my relationship will be at risk, my careers will be at risk, whatever it is. And so I just have some empathy for that, knowing, for a lot of people, the stakes are different.
Yeah.
And so I would say gently, bringing things up gently, bringing things up with eye language and non-violently, and this communication and talking around the stuff can be worse and scarier than the actual sex itself.
100%. But I like your idea of being sly and maybe turning on that fucking Netflix episode I'm on, because then he could be like, oh, I've heard of that podcast, or something like that, and then maybe she'll feel more like, because if once you see that episode, you're like, oh my God, other girls aren't coming. Oh, I maybe can talk about this because I feel more normal and shit. I think the most attractive thing is when guys are genuinely interested in a woman's pleasure. And I think that's a really nice gift he can give to her, being like, yo, I care about this, In
general, good practice is set containers. Like, hey, like, let's, hey, I want to ask you about this thing. Like, can we talk about this? And not like kind of making it into this like longer like relationship thing.
This isn't about our relationship.
No.
This is about a small thing about me, but that will turn into a big thing between us, hopefully. Here was another question I had, just because I've been taking questions now, guys. How fun is that? This one girl says that she has to have straight legs and point her toes or she can't orgasm. There's been a lot of people sitting in different positions. So maybe if you haven't tried one, try straight legs and pointing your toes. But her question was, I haven't introduced my toy to any partners yet, and I'm not seeing anyone right now, but I'm out there. Have you got any advice for this?
If you want to, then you absolutely should, if that's what you want to do. With that said, a lot of people have issues around toys. I find that it doesn't have to, if you're listening and you're kind of like, oh, I wouldn't want a toy in the relationship. That means someone wants to have pleasure with you. They want to have more pleasure with you.
Yeah.
Like, someone bringing a toy in means that they want to experience something with you together. And that is a beautiful and amazing thing. With that said, a lot of people I have, experience and have told me their experiences of bringing in a toy and having the reaction be very much, do you need that? What, do I even need to be here? Really defensive, really like can be negative. And so strategies around that is to really, start off introducing the toy conversation with like, I really love like the pleasure we're having.
Yeah.
What really makes me hot is this thing. And then stop talking and see what they say.
Yeah. And
like,
I would say too, if you're a brave person, maybe do a bit of performance art, because then at least it's like, hey, this is going to pleasure you too. A lot of guys and women like seeing their partner or the person that they're currently with use a toy and just experience pleasure in front of them. It's a very sexy, very vulnerable thing to do. But if you do have hangups about sex toys and other people, and you think that like, oh, machines are stealing our jobs, they're not stealing your jobs. They're making your job a lot easier and nice. Like, we don't just rely on your dick. We don't just my hand gets tired. How nice would it be if you can just use a button and we can kiss?
One of the things that we work on at O.School, because I think that within relationships, this is also easier, right? Because within relationships, you've got some trust, you've got, a mode of communicating around things. But with hookups, I find this being one of the most difficult things, because you don't want to have to sit down and have like a 2-hour consent. You want to have consent and talk, but there's, you're not going to sit down and get like, so much communication, and sometimes you just want to bang. You just want to jump in and bang. And if you want to bring a toy in, the reactions of that, and like, some men have never seen sex toys. Some women have never seen sex toys. Lots of people have never seen sex toys. And so I also, say that there's like, you can incorporate this into dirty talk, into texting, so that you're not shocking someone because they just have never seen one before, and they were just shocked, and you thought like, oh, I'm being shamed. But maybe someone's like, what is that? And I don't know. And so I would say incorporating it into sexting, into, hey, like, I've got this toy and I can't wait to show you. Making it fun, and not, because I also have seen people who when they try to talk about these things, it's like, oh, so I have to talk to you about something, and they're anxious,
and then that
they're
makes it like it's gonna be like this massive floppy dildo that like has veins and shit, and it, like, most of the sex toys now are beautiful, like it's not gonna be like another cock in the room, like, don't worry. And if it is, I think that would be great. One thing about sex toys too is just have some kind of wipes, so that the person is assured that it is clean.
I have an automatic warming lube dispenser.
I was gonna say,
and like, that's the bougiest thing to pull out. Be like, baby, don't worry.
There are some really
no contamination
do you have that
here.
Gorgeous one though, that's like in an O shape, and then oh my, it's so pretty.
Right, but it's also really hygienic.
Yeah,
because you don't have to grab lube bottles and touch it. It's got a great, hygienic purpose, as well as being super impressive to all people you're sleeping with. One thing that I created to try to make this easier for fun with my team is we created, how you go to restaurants or sandwich places or burrito places now, and you can fill out like an order form. Yeah. And we made a hookup order form.
That's amazing. Will you send that to me? Oh my God.
I made it exactly like, I made it exactly like a sandwich order form, in that there's like little things you can choose, like, this is the motion I like, this is the positions I like, these things don't do, please. Like don't put onions, or and then there's in the bottom, there's like, on average I take X amount of minutes to come, and on average, this is, and then you just
allergic to anal, except on Tuesdays.
Or like, and it's kind of like, you've seen the really exhaustive yes, no, maybe list for desires, perhaps. If you haven't, like, there are these huge lists that you can say everything that's on the table, off the table, or a maybe, and that's amazing. But again, I think we need more resources for more casual or hookup situations where you're not, you don't get to know someone potentially yet. I think to close the orgasm gap, which is real between especially heterosexual couples, these types of tools are helpful, and so I'll send it to you. But I'm really proud of it. I have yet to use it, and what I would love, and this is my like plug, if anyone would like to use it with someone and tell me how it went.
Yeah, seriously.
We would love to get feedback about how it actually happens in the wild. Like, I will use it as soon as the opportunity comes, where I'm going to print it out. I actually already do this in a way. So when I have a new sexual partner, I do this kind of as a joke, but also not as a joke. I text people, or I give people a written list of things.
You're like Christian Grey.
that delight me.
Yeah.
No, but I don't. But it's not limits. It's not like a con. It's
Yeah,
just
yeah,
like
yeah.
it's actually it's just a list of things that delight me,
That's nice.
and it's just information.
This
Like
is
it's not all
something
sexual.
that can make me happy. No,
It's
like,
not all sexual.
Bring me sour straws if I am sad.
Pretty much,
Yeah.
or getting my hair blow dried. That's the
Yes.
thing that like, and a lot of people are like. And I don't ask for any of these things. I'm just saying,
No,
hey,
it's just
for
like, these
your
are things that
information,
I like. Yeah.
these are things that not just I like, that delight
Delight me.
Like
Yeah.
I teach women, like I actually challenge people all over the country when I do sex education as homework, just make a list of things that frickin' delight you.
Yeah.
Like don't, like that aren't even, don't have to be sexual. And it's funny, a lot of people write me after I have them do this and they're like, no one's ever asked me. that.
Right?
No one's ever
Yeah.
asked me what, and I got this from another sex educator, Kate Kenfield. She's one of my colleagues who've taught me so much about joy stacking and how we have to remind people that there's all these positive, great things, that it can be fun and silly. And, really at the end of the day, that's what keeps things, I think, less scary and like more likely to happen is if we just, I think a lot of times, when people get educated too, there's a lot of just like weight and heaviness and like use condoms and like, and yes, condoms are sex toys as well. I
Yeah.
like to call all the things that we do as sex educators really just other toys. And so
Yeah.
I'd love to send you the order form and get your feedback on it.
We need it. But the thing I was thinking about with wipes too, and with like sex toys, just to wrap up her question, make people feel like more hygienic so that your brain can feel more rested. Because a lot of having sex is you're just wondering, or like there's, like, do I smell? Is something funky? Like just take that worry out,
Wipe it away.
Wipe it away. Okay, and I think we can take one more question maybe, and then we'll wrap this shit up. All right, so one person asked, she would really like to hear an episode all about STDs. She said, I know it's not a subject that is not generally fun to talk about, but I think the message is of greater importance. I mean, yeah, it is. We do talk about STDs in episode 13, Dirty Girl Privilege. The CEO of Laurel's, she talks about her experience with oral sex and being married and having an STD. But I assume you guys have a lot of information on STDs on O.School.
I do. And I love talking about this. I have like 3 main things though that I think aren't talked about at all. One is we need to rename them. Like they should be called like STIs are standard transmitted infections. Like sex is standard. And I think we put so much weight on them, but they're really like I feel like I wish people were educated more on how common and how not that big of a deal many of them are. Like much of sex education is shaming and making people fear having them so much that I actually think it makes it worse. We're at an all-time high rate of STIs in the country right now. And one of the things that's going to make that go down, in my opinion, is if people understood that, this is part of having sex. For a lot of people, there's every amount of prevention that should be done. And also these are some of the risks. And for example, I use the comparison of if someone goes on a skiing trip and gets their leg broken, when they come back, people don't go, you need to really stop skiing. Like, how could you, how dare you? And this person loves skiing. They're like, every time I go skiing, I take every precaution, but I may break my leg. STIs are something where we really shame and blame people for doing it. And of course, some people aren't safe, right? Maybe you ski without the proper precautions and you don't do those things. But I think we need to think about it like that.
Yeah.
And yes, the first thing that we have to do, we have to actually just, and I think there's a lot of money that's been spent. Like, for example, herpes, right? Like you see pictures of it and it's made to seem like a life sentence. Like people, the Vegas joke, right? Like everything stays in Vegas except herpes. This is like, and we propagate these and we joke about these things, but they're really bad considering so many people have herpes. And let's just be real. Herpes, yes, is an affection that there is no cure for, that you live with. And also it's very treatable. People who have it can have great and awesome sex lives. Yeah. And it's like pimples. Does everyone have a pimple once in their life?
Yes.
They're just little red. They are little red bumps. And we have to call them what they medically are instead of like.
It has such a worse connotation.
Psoriasis. I've had sex with people with psoriasis and eczema. And herpes is just another. But yet we put the weight on STIs.
It just sounds much more disgusting.
It's like leprosy. It's like we don't call leprosy anymore. We call it Hansen's disease. So excuse me if I have offended anyone saying leprosy, but it's the same stigma. Like herpes has the same stigma, and it absolutely doesn't have to be that way. One of the most common things I get is, oh my God, I have herpes, and like am I ever going to have sex again? And I always have to tell them like, oh my goodness, you know, you're going to probably be better at protecting your partners than people who have herpes and don't know that they are HSV1 or 2 positive, right? And so that's the second thing. And the third thing is that we need to meet people where they are. I can't tell you how many times I've been to talks, and you know, as educators, we should always tell people, you know, the best way to protect themselves, right? But and also, for example, I don't know many people who use a condom during oral sex. I have talked to thousands, literally, of people about their safer sex practices.
It blows my mind.
And how, and it's not like they haven't heard, no, you should use a condom. Everybody knows, like eating vegetables. Everyone knows you should eat more vegetables. It's really hard to do.
Yeah.
And also, we all need to know that risk aware, like we need to empower people to have risk aware sexual interactions, that they can you know the facts and you know, assess the risk. Because what I see happening is people shaming people, like, oh, you knew to wear a condom and you didn't. And what this creates is more silence, more shame, less talking about it. People don't go get tested because they're like, oh, well, I wasn't the perfect sexual health being. And the more we moralize it, more we moralize it, the more that people will not talk about it. And so as educators, we have to make sure that we are real with people, and that, yes, you should use barriers for everything. Dental dams all day, every day. We need to not moralize the issues to the point where people don't, again, I am anti-shame. My whole life, I'd never want to shame people for anything that they do, because I know the power and the negative power of it. And so, that would be my 3 things. That, of course, you know, doing an episode on STIs and actually how to prevent and all of that. My opinion at this point, after building O.School for almost 2 years and speaking to so many students, is that a lot of people know what to do. And we need to
they just don't feel comfortable talking about it,
right? Or we need to make better. We need to continue to challenge ourselves to make better barriers. Not that there aren't. There are all awesome barriers out there. And also, I still hear from people like, these don't feel good, and there's a. So I want to rebrand barriers to sex toys. You know, like once a condom comes out, means shit's going down. That's so a good thing, you know. And so we need to increase the marketing and the branding of these things, apart from like don't die.
And make them a little easier to put on, just so they don't slow down the mood.
Last thing, get really good at hearing other people's STI statuses. And I think one of the big things that we need to do is not just teach people how to disclose, teach people how to hear disclosures. Because one of the worst things that I see is people who preach about this stuff, but as soon as someone comes back and says, hey, I actually have HSV1 and 2, then it's like, you know, and it's okay, make whatever choice you're going to make, but you can do so without propagating this idea that people with STIs are dirty or unclean or unworthy of sex, because that is absolutely going to make the STI rate go higher and higher and higher. And so I think that's also like tools in their toolkit is come up with your response of like, thanks so much for sharing your status with me. I'm going to think about this, but I'd love if we like cuddled or did these other activities.
Or what do you know that can keep us exactly as safe? And then that person will be like, I've lived with this for a while. Let me tell you, and I will keep you safe because you asked and you were sweet. This has been so much fun. Thank you so much for coming here while you've been in town. I loved having you. I just have to ask this to you as well. Andrea, did you finish?
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much for coming. And we'll see you next time on How Come. Bye.
It's not you, it's me. I try so hard to finish honestly. They say you'll know when you go all the way from A right down to O. Oh no, I think that I've still got a ways to go. Oh, I'm sick of this and I have got to know. How come? How come? How come I can't achieve? How come I can't achieve? I'm rolling up my sleeves. I'm rolling up my sleeves. Oh baby, I believe these guests can help, 'cause I can't do it by myself. I wanna just...
I forgot to ask everyone their handles. If you want to follow Andrea, her handle is Andrea Barrica with 2 R's. If you want to find O.School on Instagram, it is O.School, but like spelled out .o.dot school. And then the sex rap is just at the sex rap. And you can go to O.School's website if you just type into your browser O.School. Cool. Goodbye.